Just before we dive back into the episode, I wanted to quickly share something that might interest you, especially if today's conversation has got you thinking about your own sustainability work. Some of the things we hear most in this industry are, I wish I could connect with other people doing this work, or I'd love to turn my sustainability expertise into something more. Well, 51 to Carbon Zero, the sponsor of this podcast, have created their own referral network. And it does exactly that. This isn't about selling you something, it's actually about helping you make money while building the sustainability community we all need. So here's what's in it for you. First, you get to join a genuine community of sustainability experts who share knowledge, refer work to each other, and solve problems together. So, no more working in isolation. Secondly, there's real money involved. There's 10% plus commission on software referrals. We're talking about projects that go from 30 grand up to 100 grand. Plus, you'll be able to boost your presence by taking part in our fireside chats. I've actually got an email in front of me from Louise Stevens, one of the ambassadors, and it says that all her clients are genuinely happy because she's got a great partner and her clients love them. But here's the bigger picture. You'll be helping accelerate the sustainability transition that we all desperately need. Every referral, every connection, every collaboration moves us closer to the world we're all working towards. If this resonates with you and you want to earn some extra income, click the link in our show notes to become a 51 to Carbon Zero ambassador. Okay, back to the show. This episode of Sustainability Solved is brought to you in association with Business Declares, bringing business leaders together to show support for action on climate and nature. Hi and welcome to Sustainability Solved, the Sustainable Business Podcast. I'm Will Richardson, the founder and CEO of the Green Element Group, incorporating Green Element, Convey Your Footprint, and of course, Sustainability Solved. We've been empowering organisations to manage their environmental impacts for a just and sustainable world since 2004.
And I'm Charlie Luxton, an architectural designer who focuses on sustainable buildings. Today we're talking to Charlotte Harrington, co-CEO of Belu Water, a purpose-led business which creates profit to do good in the world by selling bottled water and filtration systems. It was set up 20 years ago and in that time has donated nearly 6 million to its charity partner, WaterAid. Welcome, Charlotte.
Thanks for having me.
You're the co-CEO of Belu with Natalie Campbell, who was appointed in 2020. And you're not alone in this kind of setup. Netflix also has 2 CEOs. Funny enough, Postcode Lottery have 2 or 3 managing directors, they're a client. And so tell me about why you have 2 people leading the company and the challenges and rewards of that.
Yeah, of course. It's always a good talking point, actually, because I think it is still quite unusual. Whilst you've cited a few examples, I think it's it's something that if you're a founder of a business is very common. So co-founders exist, but actually, when people talk about co-CEOs, they're always curious to understand how does it work, what does it mean in reality. And for us, it came about quite organically and quite naturally. We were in the middle of the pandemic, and Nat and I have very different skill sets. So actually, putting ourselves together into ultimately, the same role just made sense at that point in time. And it means that essentially together we can go further, we can go faster, we can have 2 very different views on, issues that come up. And I think it means that we ultimately get to a position whereby we come out with a stronger answer, both for the team, but also for our impact. So for us, it's been about repositioning the business, the brand, the direction of travel, and then actually coming together to figure out how do we do this in a way that really lives all of our values and enables us to maximize the impact that we can deliver.
But surely you would normally think that like a CEO would be balanced by a COO or a CFO. We're saying a lot of 3-letter acronyms here, but that balancing process would happen sort of outwith of the single role of the CEO. But you're actually saying you see real value of before anything comes from that centralized position, it is already sort of sense checked. Is that sort of how you see it working?
Yeah, and I think, for me, the CEO role is often felt to be quite a lonely role. And certainly when we were looking at recruiting Nat at that time, or a new CEO at that time, I'd said, I would do it as a job share, but I didn't want to do it on my own because I felt it would be really lonely. And actually, we decided as a board that would be quite difficult to recruit for. Roll forward 6 months, and Nat was the one that suggested it. And it just, as I said, came about quite organically. And I think it does enable us to sense check and kind of bounce ideas around in the same way that you might do with a COO or a CFO in another business, to come together with a more balanced response before we then feed it out to the teams or take it to the board or shareholders and that sort of thing. So you're right, we sort of do that sort of play around between us. And I think that gets us to a better position faster than perhaps one person's view on the world.
Do people find it easy to know who to talk to? Like, it's that line of commands that I'm interested in.
Yeah. So what we've done, we've been doing this for 4 years now. So we sort of bounce things between us depending on, what the need of the business is, but also where we think we need to kind of play to our strengths. So at the beginning, for example, I focused on growth and sort of international. This was in the middle of the pandemic. And Nat was kind of getting to grips with the basics of the business and actually getting us back on track post-pandemic. So we sort of split the kind of roles in that way. Roll forward, and actually I've taken over most of the line responsibility of the team. So on the day-to-day basis, most of the senior leadership team reporting to me, with the exception of the kind of brand, the comms, the strategy and the people side of things. So we move things around to keep it fresh for us, but also to ensure that people do have that clarity. And we talk regularly. So the reality is they can't play us off. We do know exactly what we're doing. And we also, we've got into the habit now of almost being able to second guess what the other person would sort of say in response to anyone's questions or queries and that sort of thing. So it's created a really powerful partnership, I think, between us. It's a bit like a marriage. You have to work at it, you have to spend time on it, but the benefits of having it can be really, really positive.
And do people refer to you as Natlot or or Shartley at all? I don't know.
Not yet, but maybe they will after this.
Can we just roll back a second, Charlotte? And I gave a very potted introduction to Belu, and it's been running for 20 years. So it'd be great to hear a little bit more about how it started from your perspective. I know you weren't there at the very beginning, but how it started from your perspective and how it's morphed and where it's going, just to get a sense of it as an organisation.
Yeah, of course. So, Belu started with a simple idea that in doing business, you could help solve some of the world's problems. The guy that founded it was a guy called Reed Paget, and his thinking was very much ahead of its time. 20 years ago, people weren't looking at the good that business could do or the way in which a business could solve some of the world's problems. So he was very forward thinking and pioneering in his kind of outlook and approach. So he started the business. It then morphed into kind of the business that or is more familiar to people today in terms of, a social enterprise, which now, most people have heard about. And, we are a business that has clear purpose. And we were founded with that belief. And I think that's the bit that sets us apart from a lot of businesses today, because lots of people are trying to retrofit and figure out how do we put values and purpose and impact and, achieve our ESGs and all of that sort of thing within a business that's already established. Whereas we were founded on that belief that you could help solve those world's problems. So the kind of the premise of the business today is that we supply primarily hospitality and corporates with bottled water, drinks, and filtration systems that deliver an impact to the world. So when I talk about the impact, it's really our purpose. And our purpose is to change the way the world sees water, which is a really broad statement, but I think today, probably more than ever in the UK, actually, we take water for granted. So you get up in the morning, you put on the tap, you've got beautiful, clean drinking water on the whole, and actually you use water probably 10 or 15 times before you even leave the house, but you don't think about it. Actually, when you look across the world, that's not the reality for many people. And so by us kind of shining a spotlight on water and the importance of water and the fact that everybody needs it to sustain life, we can, by taking what is a commoditized product, frame it in a different way for businesses to enable them to choose to work with Belu. And in working with Belu, we invest 100% of our profits into our purpose, which to date has meant giving 5.8 million to WaterAid. So it's a really interesting, I guess, it's a business, but actually the shareholders ultimately are a charity. So we are a business, not a charity. And I always like to make that distinction really clear, because we are not delivering the impact directly ourselves. So we are a commercial entity. We trade as a commercial entity in a way that we hope will inspire others to look at how they could replicate or be inspired by the business model, because it is a little bit different. And it does take some adjusting. So it does mean that some of the decisions that we make aren't those that a traditional business might make, because we always ensure they're aligned against our values. So things like thinking environment first is one of our core values. So everything that we do is through the lens of what does this mean in the longer term? Actually, how can we improve what we do? How can we make sure that what we do is better than anything else in the marketplace? And how do we talk about the things we do as much as the things we don't do? And why don't we do those things? Because often those are the bits that businesses don't talk about. And actually, sometimes that's where the more interesting story is. So for us, it's about being really transparent and demonstrating what's possible and where we struggle, and where we're trying to get to is really a world where people do value this natural resource that is water, but also that people consume and procure responsibly. So we are one of those businesses that can demonstrate that it is possible to grow a business that is profitable, but actually really change the way in which impact is delivered across the world. So whether that's through a partnership like WaterAid or some of our other impact partners like the Rivers Trust or Blue Marine Foundation, these are all people that we believe are demonstrating what's possible, and all comes under that umbrella of our purpose around changing the way the world sees water.
You've given huge amounts of money to WaterAid, 6 million for all intents and purposes.
Yeah.
That relationship must be very strong, but does that relationship almost command some of the decisions you make at Belu, because they must be semi-reliant on the money that you're giving them? So I would imagine it's symbiotic, but it must be quite hard to manage that relationship.
Yeah, it's an interesting, I guess, question in terms of it's something that everyone in the team is really passionate about. It is one of the partnerships where, when you talk to people, when you're interviewing them for roles and that sort of things, or you talk to our clients and, particularly hotels and restaurants, get really, really excited about the impact that WaterAid can deliver. So undoubtedly, yes, it is really important. Does it change the way in which we make decisions? Sometimes, I guess it has done in the past, but we have a really clear, we call it our 4 Ps framework. And, first and foremost, it's always about our purpose. It's then about people. It's then about our product, and the profit is a byproduct of all of those things coming together, rather than us just making decisions based on how much profit can we generate and therefore how much can we give to WaterAid. Because if you do the latter, the risk there is that you compromise everything else. So you don't have the best product. You perhaps work your team too hard. It's not actually a sustainable business model that could be scaled. So we're still on that journey, but certainly we are striving to increase the areas where we operate. So, for example, we used to only be based in the UK. We now offer filtration systems in Hong Kong and Singapore. And actually for us, you can only do that if you take a slightly different approach. The partnership is still key, but they are the beneficiaries of the shareholders, arguably, of the business. They can't be the driving factor for every decision. Otherwise, it's not a balanced decision-making process.
I have 2 questions. I always thought it was Belu, but you're saying Belu. Which is it like Nike and Porsche and Porsche?
Yes, completely.
Right, okay. Good. I thought I put my foot in it there.
It can be anything you want it to be.
Right. Let's go Belu. You're the boss. We'll go Belu.
Go on.
The second question is, actually I've got 3 questions. I'm getting greedy here, Will. I do apologise. The second question is this, that somehow I've always been told, and this might be rubbish, and hopefully you can fill out the facts on this, that the bottled water is something like 3,000 times more carbon intensive than water delivered through the tap. Now, how you get to that figure, who knows? And carbon intensity is a different figure, but clearly a bottle of water has a lot more embodied carbon than getting something from the tap. So right at the very heart of what you do, there is a slight contradiction. And so I'm interested about the filtration system thing and that balance. I mean, how do you respond to that contradiction?
And it absolutely is a contradiction, you're right. And when Belu was founded, it was founded as a sort of activist business. It was very much aimed at originally campaigning against bottled water. Because you are 100% right. If you can consume water that is safe from the tap, from a carbon intensity perspective, that is the right thing to do. And we do advocate that. So tap is best. The challenge is that in the markets where we operate, so hospitality primarily, bottled water is a key part of their financial model.
Which is a problem.
And when they're transitioning away from it, but it's a journey that they need to go on. And it also depends which market you're serving. So there are some markets where, for example, if you are very reliant on tourists, perhaps from some countries, they don't trust tap water, irrespective of what we might say in this country about tap water. They only trust drinking bottled water. So it depends who our clients, ultimate end guests are. That has an impact on their perspective as well. So you are right. It is much more carbon intensive. What we've tried to do is dispel some of the myths around, how do you reduce the carbon intensity of it, whether that's lightweighting the materials, we don't export our product. There's a number of things that we've done over the years, increasing the amount of recycled content in the packaging that does improve the carbon intensity. But ultimately, we would like to encourage our customers to move away from their reliance on bottled water and move to filtration systems, because that enables them to upsell to their guests and still offer, chilled, still sparkling water that can be presented in a beautiful bottle and they can still monetize in some way. But it does reduce significantly the carbon intensity.
And are you seeing that filtration uptake growing steadily, or is it feels like it's a sort of tsunami over the last 2 or 3 years that pretty much now you walk into any restaurant, hotel and ask for filtered water, tap water, and they'll bring it out filtered in a nice bottle. And actually that is fantastic. And I suspect most people would be willing to sort of pay something towards that. Maybe I'm wrong.
And on the whole, you're absolutely right. It's definitely picking up. We've been doing this for about 5-6 years, the filtered side of things. And in the early days, it was the early adopters that were those that were talking about the provenance of the food. And, they set their business models up in a slightly different way. So they weren't reliant on the income from bottled water. And, some customers rejected it. 6 years ago, it was like, oh, no, we must have bottled water. Now, I would say the majority of our incoming inquiries tend to be about filtered water, but people are on a journey. So for some people, it's right for maybe back of house, but it isn't right necessarily for their guests, or it might be right in the cafe, but not in the Michelin star restaurant yet. So it's really about taking our customers on that journey. And because we can offer it all, we offer them whatever makes sense to them for the setting where they need to serve it. And, we don't want to be too preachy, but ultimately we will share the facts with them, and then they can make the informed decision because we can show them the carbon intensity of their choices. So for us, it's about educating them as well and helping them advocate internally quite often. So explaining to the CFO, why is this a good idea and what's the risk and how might they be able to recover some of that revenue? But consumers are definitely changing their opinion. And you see, the number of people you now see carrying a refillable bottle in comparison to 5-6 years ago is significant. So I think we are getting there, and that's what we're hoping to capitalise on.
Okay, that makes sense. So before Belu, you worked for Tesco's, WH Smith, so corporates, big corporates, and you're now working for all intents and purposes, potentially an activist kind of organisation. What did you learn in that corporate life that you've been able to bring into Belu?
So I think my experience, I spent 15 years of my career at those two businesses, and they were great learning ground, I think, for me commercially. I think had I not had that experience, I wouldn't have had the rounded outlook that I perhaps came to Belu with, both from an operational but also from a commercial perspective. I think the other thing that I learned was that, a business can be founded with clear values and a purpose, but if you don't live those when times are tough, actually the impact is that the credibility of those disappears. And I think those sorts of, those moments have grounded me in terms of what's important to me. And so my personal values align with Belu's personal values in a way that perhaps in the corporate world, I didn't feel that you could necessarily be yourself, and you couldn't necessarily, I mean, times have changed as well. So I think, you can now be yourself, and people embrace it perhaps to a greater extent than they would have done in big corporates. But I think for me, there were frameworks that we worked to, there were, commercial realities that you had to achieve that I've brought to Belu that's enabled us to become quite a structured business. So we talk about being a 20-year-old startup, but when people join us, they're surprised about the processes, the systems. We've got things that quite often startups don't have. And I think, your formative years of your career are really, really important. I learned a lot about what I didn't want to do going forward as well. So, for me, the idea of shareholder value dictating all decisions in a business was just fundamentally flawed. And I'd become really disillusioned with the reality of being in a corporate, coupled with the fact that I had 3 really young kids, and the idea of flexible working just wasn't embraced. So I knew that whatever I did next in my career had to give me greater fulfillment, but much more flexibility. And I wanted to have a sense of, what I do matters and makes a difference in this world, not that it's just about that kind of shareholder value, because that's not fulfilling. That for me just didn't mean enough.
And have you found, obviously one sets out on these journeys with an ambition of how they might make you feel, and the benefits that you talk about, the fringe benefits of feeling good about getting up in the morning to say, I'm going to make a difference. Has that sort of delivered on the promise?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think it's, you have it in any job, right? You have good days and you have bad days. We still have the same challenges. The pandemic was particularly challenging. But actually, in terms of me personally, I think that what we do and how we do it is quite different in the marketplace. And personally, that's quite fulfilling. I think the way in which we tackle challenges that come upon us, or, the way in which we optimize partnerships is quite interesting. And I think that, because we're a growing business, so much is changing all of the time. It's really, really interesting. And maybe one of the benefits of working in a smaller business is that you can see it end to end in a way that in big corporates, you're a tiny cog in a massive machine. You never get that sense of it really matters what I do today, because there's a million other things going on. Whereas in a small business, you can decide today that you're going to do something, and tomorrow that starts happening. And, that is, to me, much more rewarding. So there's a pace about it that you can set. So you can slow it down, you can speed it up. But actually, you can make things happen in a way that just feels much more rewarding for you, but also for the team and for your customers.
Do you also get a sense that Belu started 20 years ago when this idea of a purpose-driven company, like proper company, but purpose-driven, was very novel. But even in the last 4 years, while you've been involved, it has massively, the whole sector's massively transformed. Did you also get this halo benefit of we are lamplighters in actually the transformation of an industry, as well as the fact we're doing all this amazing stuff for WaterAid and trying to get people away from bottled water in traditional formats? Is that part of the job satisfaction that you're getting, an impact actually beyond just the money that you can donate?
Yeah, it absolutely is. I mean, we sometimes talk about, the 10x effect. How many people can we inspire to do things differently based on just learning a bit about how we go about business? And that is, it is great to think you could influence other people beyond your business and challenge them or coach them or mentor them and give them that opportunity to absolutely add to the impact in the world, because there's so much information out there. Sometimes, people don't know where to start. And if they can look at somebody and say, but they've done it and this is how they did it, what can we learn? I think that is hugely, hugely exciting. It's the same with developing a team. Yeah. It's, some of that personal satisfaction comes from seeing your team grow and develop and thrive and, and go off and do great things outside of the business sometimes as well, because that's the part that you've played, much like a teacher, I guess, as kids leave school.
A lot of our listeners, they're either consultants broadly across many different sectors or industries, or CEOs or founders or senior leadership team. So the stuff that you've learned from previous careers, because there'll be lots of people that are transitioning into more purpose-driven businesses. What's been your kind of, not eureka moment, but kind of, I'm really proud of what I did there because I learned that from there to there. Is that a question that's understandable?
Poacher turned gamekeeper. What martial art tricks, judo tricks did you learn that you're now turning for good?
So I think, it's a good question. What have I learned? I think I probably underestimated, actually. So when I left Tesco, I'd underestimated how much I knew and how much I'd learned and how applicable that would be beyond because I've been in retail for 15 years, so beyond a retail or beyond, I was in buying, so beyond buying. Actually, I think you can pigeonhole yourself. And actually the thing that I realised was that you can apply your skills. You've got quite general skills when you come out of retail. And I think corporates do have, great learning frameworks, and therefore, you have been trained in ways that you maybe don't appreciate. And you add such value to a small business that doesn't have that expertise. And I probably didn't appreciate that for a good few years, actually, until, I'd really got into Belu and embraced it. But there is something, there is something quite challenging, I think, about leaving that stability of a bigger business and moving into a small business. But there is something also the freedom that you have, actually, the freedom to influence, the freedom to make decisions, to make mistakes, and actually, the ramifications are only, what you decide that they are. And there is much more, satisfaction as a result, because you can set what you want to do. You can set the pace, you can set the tone, you can help set the culture. There are just, you've just got a broader remit. And I think I hadn't appreciated that really does apply in any industry, actually, probably at any level, but you have to take that leap of faith.
Have you been inspired by this podcast to make your organisation more sustainable? Whether you are getting started or already on the journey, the benefits go beyond the urgent need to reduce global temperatures and protect nature. Being more sustainable will help you win new business and funding, save costs, attract and retain talent. Green Element's climate experts have developed one of the best software platforms out there. It's called Compare Your Footprint, and it enables you to calculate all areas of your organisation to offer more accurate carbon reporting and target setting. Green Element Group's experienced and friendly team can support all types and sizes of company anywhere in the world. Visit greenelement.co.uk/podcasts/promotion and quote podcast, all in capitals, for a 20% discount to get started on your environmental journey. Terms and conditions apply.
Just before we dive back into the episode, I wanted to quickly share something that might interest you, especially if today's conversation has got you thinking about your own sustainability work. Some of the things we hear most in this industry are, I wish I could connect with other people doing this work, or I'd love to turn my sustainability expertise into something more. Well, Green Element, the sponsor of this podcast, have created their own ambassador network, and it does exactly that. This isn't about selling you something, it's actually about helping you make money while building the sustainability community we all need. So, here's what's in it for you. First, you get to join a genuine community of sustainability experts who share knowledge, refer work to each other, and solve problems together, so no more working in isolation. Secondly, there's real money involved. There's a 10% commission on software referrals, and 5% on consultancy work. We're talking about projects that go from £1,000 right up to $100,000. Plus, you'll be able to boost your presence by taking part in our fireside chats. I've actually got an email in front of me from Louise Stevens, one of the ambassadors, and it says that all her clients are genuinely happy because she's got a great partner and her clients love them. But here's the bigger picture. You'll be helping accelerate the sustainability transition that we desperately need. Every referral, every connection, every collaboration moves us closer to the world we're all working towards. If this resonates with you and you want to earn some extra income, click the link in our show notes to apply to become a Green Element ambassador. Okay, back to the show. This episode of Sustainability Solved is brought to you by Business Declares, a not-for-profit business network of over 100 businesses working together for a sustainable future. I'm really pleased to be able to join forces with Business Declares for this podcast, as they are a cause close to my heart, and I already volunteer to them offering advice, attending group meetings, and helping set up and promote events, like the recent Q. I would encourage you to join as a member today so you can get help accelerating your action on net zero and nature targets for your business and grow your network of forward-thinking green business leaders. You can find out more information about upcoming events and how you apply to join at businessdeclares.com. What's the best, not best, this is that's a rubbish way to frame it, but what's maybe one or two projects that you've funded that you've gone, wow, that's brilliant. That's, I'm really proud, like around a dinner table, or if you're meeting other people, you go, this is what went on there.
Yeah, I mean, I think the other thing I should say about our partnership with WaterAid is that we give them unrestricted funds. So that means that we enable them to decide where the need is greatest, and that they can then fund they operate in 22 countries across the world, so they can put that money wherever it needs to be. So we never claim to run this project per se. It's about actually we enable WaterAid to serve the communities where the need is greatest. What was a huge privilege actually when I joined the business is that I went to Malawi to see WaterAid's work firsthand. So whilst this wasn't necessarily a project specifically that we had funded, typically this is the sort of work that they do. And we'd visited various communities, both pre and post intervention. And there was one community, and I can't remember the name, but it was essentially a very rural community. We travelled for a good few hours on unmade roads to get there. And when we arrived, it was at a healthcare facility. And this was, I think, the only healthcare facility for miles around. And it was primarily where women would come and have their babies if they weren't going to have them in the community. And I think I'd had, my youngest was probably about 9 or 10 months old. So to me, it was still quite a raw emotion to recall where I'd been in a very beautiful, clean hospital, to then see what was effectively in the middle of nowhere, a shed with no running water. And the birthing suite, if you could even call it that, was a room where there was a mattress on the floor and there was a bed, and then there were some cushions, and up to 4 women at any point in time could be in labour in that room. And that was the moment. And it was really early on. It was about a couple of months into me being at Belu. And it was that moment that I realised, A, how privileged I was, and B, the reality across the world is quite different, but also how integral having clean water in those sorts of situations and a toilet would be, because the number of children that didn't survive, the number of babies and mums that didn't survive because of that, because of the disease, because they couldn't clean themselves, there was no dignity, all of these things became very real. And I think that, that moment and that insight gives you that, even when times are tough, you should appreciate the privileged life we live. But for me, the purpose of the business became really personal. So it became very real and very relatable. And, just being able to say, I could make this difference and I could enable that hospital to have water and toilets, and, to educate the people that came from the communities around about the importance of hygiene, I think is just so critical. So I think that would be one example. I think the other example, which probably is less intense perhaps, is around, from a sustainability perspective. We moved away from carbon offsetting a few years ago. We became slightly disillusioned with the way in which we were able to buy the credits, because we are not big enough to go directly to those that are creating the sort of credits and see what's going on. We had to buy through a broker, and it was always a little bit too opaque for us. So we decided that actually we would move the monies that we had traditionally done, we'd invested in carbon offsetting, to supporting other charities, primarily with nature-based solutions and increasing biodiversity locally in the UK. So we started working with the Rivers Trust, Thames 21, and more recently Blue Marine Foundation. And we've done some, small scale, but restoration work around a canal up in Montgomery, which is very close to where our bottled water comes from. And for us, it's a small way in which we can demonstrate what's possible. But, to your point earlier around how can other people amplify and kind of be inspired, imagine if everybody did that. If everybody using water in their business just did one act like that. And we are not talking big budgets, but considering how much money people channel into other initiatives that don't necessarily deliver that benefit, those sorts of things are really easy for people to replicate. And there are lots of amazing businesses doing amazing things out there that are about restoring some of the things that are essential for our daily lives. So for us, there is a two-pronged kind of approach: the global and then the local. Those are the things that I think are, I'd say I'm proud about.
But that sounds like quite an extreme and actually very honourable and inspiring decision to say, we just don't think these carbon credits is opaque enough. We're not completely convinced by it. We're just going to park that and do our own thing, because you're obviously not getting the certificate with the the edging and all of that stuff to say, but actually you've said no, we don't mind. We believe this is better value for the planet and our purpose.
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, it was something that I'd thought for a while, and I don't think it's fair to say that all carbon credits are not valid, but the way in which we could access that market felt uncomfortable to us. It's not transparent. And one of the things that we always pride ourselves on being is transparent. So we publish all of our accounts, we have them audited, we give everyone free access to our impact data, everything is there in the hope that it will inspire others to do more. And when we couldn't get that clarity, actually, we just decided to be guided by our gut instinct. And our gut instinct was, this is not money well invested. And everything that we do, we want to see that the investment delivers to our impact. Yeah. And so it's not about a return on that investment per se, but it is about being able to stand over it and confidently say that money was spent with this intention and this is what it delivered. And we couldn't do that. So we needed to find a better way. And you're absolutely right. It does mean that no longer can we claim we are carbon neutral. But we're comfortable with that because we still continue to follow the very exciting PAS 2060 framework. And we follow that all the way through. So we completely measure our footprint. We continue to reduce it. We make a forward commitment to reduce it. We just simply don't do the last step, which is offset. And instead, we invest in nature-based solutions. So we've kind of kept the bits that we feel work. But if the market becomes regulated and if we believe there is a way in which we could have absolute clarity on where that money is going and the impact that's delivered by that investment, we would absolutely re-engage. But until then, we don't feel that it's the right thing for us.
This was one of the reasons why I really we get asked by a lot of organisations to come on this podcast. This is one of the reasons why I was so excited about actually having Belu on, was I had a conversation with Nat about this a couple of years ago when you were just transitioning into that. And I thought that was a very brave and honest way to look at how to run an organisation. And I think, and listening to you've done that. And then the money that you're giving to WaterAid, for me, I feel that organisations listening and anyone who knows organisations should be almost saying to people, look what Belu are doing. They work in water, they deliver in water. So that's the other thing that I really like, is the fact that you're not kind of going, oh yeah, we work in water and we're going to deliver, I don't know, something completely different. You're actually playing to your strengths. And I think that's really important because you know your strengths. And I think that almost strengthens your strengths as well.
Thank you.
And do you think the fact that you don't have shareholders jumping up and down saying you can't stop carbon credit offsetting has allowed you to make those decisions? But I suppose in a way to say you don't have shareholders is not really fair, because as you sort of alluded to, you do, but they're the people that benefit from WaterAid and from all the other charities that you help. So it's a kind of interesting one that it gives you the freedom to be better almost, doesn't it?
It does, but all of it's a conscious choice, right? We do have a board, right? So we do have a board and we do have investors. So we are a traditional, we are set up like a traditional business. It's just that the dividend receiving shares sit with our foundation. So, we do have those parties, but I think because we are so aligned behind our purpose and, the fact that we're in water and that's our strength, they are activists as well, right? So I think that also helps. I think the board being activist and being supportive of that sort of approach means that we are more likely to get support than we are pushback. So it does give us a freedom, you're right, that maybe other businesses don't have. But my challenge to those that feel that that's a barrier for them in their businesses is to keep pushing. Because actually, if you believe in something strongly enough and your gut instinct is saying this is the right thing to do, you have to advocate for that and you have to advocate for change. And it is those activist, entrepreneur leaders that we need in this world, because that's the only way that big businesses are going to be able to change in the way that we need them to change. So you're right, we have a freedom that is quite unique, but despite that, I would hope, we don't have the same resources, right? We don't have the same consultants working with us. We have to figure this out ourselves. So arguably where we might find things easier, there are probably other challenges that we're grappling with that in a big business you don't have, because you've got lots of insight and data and inputs and specialists and all that sort of thing in a way that we don't have. We just have what we've learned along the way and what we pick up from, our supply chain and that sort of thing.
Do you think that even over the last 4 years that you've been involved in, a purpose-driven enterprise and the sort of the company's memory, that there has been a transition in the way that the wider sort of financial business sector views you? Because so for example, access to borrowing, or if you want to try and do something where you need funds, I can imagine that traditionally there would have been like, yeah, they're sort of not really serious, so why are we going to lend them money? That might be unfounded, but that's my sense. Is that true, and has that changed over the period that you've been involved, or is it changing?
So I think it's a really fair question, actually. So the reality is, for an investor, there is no return on their investment from investing in Belu, because all of the dividend receiving shares sit with the foundation, and therefore we can't pay the same sort of, we can't pay a return on that. So we are limited in terms of who would be, interested in investing, because actually we're looking for philanthropic investors. Now, we are really fortunate because we have our original investors still involved in the business today. So actually we have two primary investors who have been with us since the business started and continue to invest. And actually it's through that we've been able to scale up and start to actually invest to grow, because we'd got to a point where, even pre-pandemic, we could only really continue at the level that we'd been at. So we were about a £6 million business, because if you give away all your profit, your cash doesn't quite align. And so we were in this sort of really difficult position where we wanted to maximize the profit to WaterAid, clearly, but we couldn't invest to grow the business. So we've had to, and the pandemic arguably helped us get to this point quite rather abruptly. But we suddenly had to look at our business model and say, but this doesn't make sense, because you can't give everything away and try and make the impact greater. So we've been rebalancing and investing to grow in the last, few years post-pandemic. And we've got investment to enable that, because you do need that capital. But had we not had those philanthropic investors, I think it's a really interesting question as to who in the market would be interested and would it have appealed. My sense or my hope would be that yes, it would, because I think there is much more talk around, green finance and social impact, and that it's becoming more of a common language, and that investors want to diversify their portfolios. But in the reality where financing is really tough to get, would they take the risk? I'm not sure.
It feels to me like there is a bit of a tightrope that you're trying to walk here, whereby you're trying to divert as much profit in the short term as possible to WaterAid and to the other charities that you're supporting. But equally, you need to keep some of that back to grow the business, to ultimately create more money for them. I imagine that is a constant. It's the same. I suppose it's the same balance that we all have every day running any kind of business. But it feels particularly, sort of important for the decision making that you're making.
It's massively important, and it is a tightrope as you described, because people, there is often a misconception between profit and cash, and I think people don't realise that whilst one does fuel the other, actually it's quite different timings, and as small business you feel that acutely. So we are always trying to balance, and especially as you're trying to scale, that's the other thing, is that the growth isn't necessarily where you need it to be to justify the investments in people or office and all those things that you need to have as a scaling business. So we have a plan called our Go Big plan, and we are constantly looking at, how do we balance the impact that we can deliver in any given year with the growth that we want to achieve in 2-3 years ahead and the investments that needs in that year, to explain, why are we a £9 million business and, giving 300,000 and not 1 million away. The reality is, if people understand what it takes to grow a business, they get it. It's when people don't understand that you then have to figure out what's the communication around, how do we explain this? And our approach has just been to create what we've called our purpose P&L, and just to show people, this is what happens. Here's revenue, here's the cost of goods. This is then, we need to pay our team, got an office. This is what's left at the end. But don't forget, we've also made all this capital investment in filtration machines and, to try and paint that picture, because we've got nothing to hide. It's all there. It's all in our accounts. But it is a tension that, we kind of dial up and dial down depending on how trade is going and, what the opportunities are versus kind of what we want to do and where we want to get to. And as you say, it's no different to any other business. It's just the impact feels more important, perhaps because this is then about transforming people's lives with the amazing work that WaterAid does. So it is a sort of, it's always a useful barometer. And also, it's really grounding, right? It makes you really consider how you invest and where you invest.
And finally, what's next for Belu? What's on the pipeline?
We have got lots of things bubbling at the moment.
Right, I love this. There's a pipeline, there's bubbling. I mean, this is...
Yeah, it's yes, no pun intended. What's next? So we obviously, I mentioned earlier, we set up in Hong Kong. We're about to launch in Singapore. Just for clarity, that is not our bottled products. It is just our filtered products. So we are looking at a sort of city-based expansion plan, which is really exciting. And Hong Kong was our first test base, mainly because they came to us. We didn't actually kind of think that we were going to go global, but the opportunity presented itself, and we thought that it was too good an opportunity to miss, and has proved to be really, really helpful in dispelling, I guess, the concern or the risk that the Belu brand and purpose wouldn't resonate beyond the UK. So there's a lot more to come in that sort of space. And then in the UK, I mean, we're still quite a small brand in the UK. Whilst we're quite well known in hospitality, we need to do some work around brand awareness to get us into more corporates and to figure out actually how we show up across the UK, because it's a huge market. And at the moment, we're still seeing a lot of imported waters and, things that we should be able to replace quite quickly to give people, a benefit from a carbon perspective, but also a much broader story. So there's a big piece of work that we need to do around brand awareness as well. And then we've got some exciting new products launching later in the year. So we're definitely keeping the team busy.
Watch this space. Watch this space.
Indeed.
Thank you so much for coming on today.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Charlotte. And that's it for this episode of Sustainability Solved. Next month, we're going to be talking to Niall Cooper from Fair Game about the Football Sustainability Index. I know very little about football, but I do know it's big business, so it's going to be very interesting. Make sure you hit follow in your app so you get notified as soon as that episode drops.
And for questions and more information on sponsorship opportunities, email podcast@sustainabilitysolved.org. And if you've enjoyed what you've heard today, please do leave us a review in your podcast app. It would be really appreciated.
We got 2 5-star reviews just, I think, a couple of days ago. Did you know? 2 5-star reviews. So please do leave some reviews. We really appreciate them. Thanks for listening. I'm Charlie Luxton.
And I'm Will Richardson. So you really enjoy sustainability and want to be a part of the solution? Come and join our vibrant community now. Book a call and we can talk more.